The layout of Matthew. Matthew is laid out when we go through and go into this. It's laid out into 6 main discussions. And we'll look at that as we're going through. And so we're going to have some different mini series in with that. And that's how we're going to break this up. And it's not chronological. So Matthew, the book of Matthew is not centered around and emphasis is not on chronological. But what it's emphasized on are these main discussions, these 5 or 6 main discussions, or these 5 or 6 main accounts. And these accounts were required and able to be written from word for word accounts of those interactions, just as we talked about earlier, because of who Matthew was. So Matthew focuses on main topics of discussion, not on chronological order. It's not how Matthew wrote this. And that's very similar to how a tax collector and an accountant in the Roman Empire would do it. So again, more support here. Matthew, so the introduction here, the first main part, not main discussion, but the first main part we look at is Matthew 1 through 3. So introduction to the King. This is going to be our first series that we will start next week, Intro to the King. And actually we've already started with these intros. But what it talks about and what it addresses is Matthew connects the story of Jesus to the storyline of the Old Testament. Matthew highlights Jesus and that he is from the messianic line of David. Matthew traces Jesus all the way to Abraham, that it's through Jesus all the nations are blessed. Matthew addresses and talks about the birth of Jesus and how it fulfilled the Old Testament prophecies. So those Old Testament prophecies were Emmanuel, God with us. And Matthew addresses that Jesus is the prophet and the great lawgiver that Moses told them to look for. And we see all throughout Matthew, Moses said, "What do you say, Jesus?" So there's a heavy emphasis on this, that Moses received, Jesus gave.